As I understand it, it's kind of gig based. So
Yep. Well, what are you going to do?
when there's work, you gotta work.
Just to have to come up another time and make more trouble.
All right. Well, it's okay even if we don't have a full house in person because we've got a full Zoom room. And Marge, do you want me to share the screen or?
Well, let's ask Jason and Chaitanya Lila. I don't need it shared, but they might.
Yeah, but I'd appreciate it.
Okay, so
Go.
let
Which
me
purpose is it
just.
today?
Okay, so we are gonna do one, two, three. All right. Share. Yay. Share. Okay. Can devotees see the Bhagavatam?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, fine. Ready?
Yes, Marge, we are live.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana Jamuna Tiravanachari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavala Bhagiri Varadari Yashoda Nandana Vrajajana Ranja Jamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This morning, we will take a look at Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, Texts 3 and 4. So text 3 first has a fairly long, somewhat, well, actually very substantial purport. And then text 4, which is a verse that we should all probably recognize. So text 3. Yasvanubhavamakila shruti saramekam adhyatma deepamatati tirshatang tamondam samsarinam karunayaha puranaguhyam Tang vyasa sunamupayami gurum muninam. Translation: Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto him, Shuka, the spiritual master of all sages, the son of Vyasadeva, who, out of his great compassion for those gross materialists who struggle to cross over the darkest regions of material existence, spoke this most confidential supplement to the cream of Vedic knowledge after having personally assimilated it by experience. There's so much just in this verse, and here is Srila Prabhupada's purport. In this prayer, Srila Sutta Goswami practically summarizes the complete introduction of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is the natural supplementary commentary on the Vedanta Sutras. The Vedanta Sutras, or the Brahma Sutras, were compiled by Vyasadeva with a view to presenting just the cream of Vedic knowledge. Srimad Bhagavatam is the natural commentary on this cream. Srila Shukadeva Goswami was a thoroughly realized master on the Vedanta Sutra, and consequently he also personally realized the commentary, Srimad Bhagavatam. And just to show his boundless mercy upon bewildered materialistic men who wanted to cross completely over nescience, he recited for the first time this confidential knowledge. There's no point in arguing that a materialistic man can be happy. No materialistic creature, be he the great Brahma or an insignificant ant, can be happy. Everyone tries to make a permanent plan for happiness, but everyone is baffled by the laws of material nature. Therefore, the materialistic world is called the darkest region of God's creation. Yet the unhappy materialists can get out of it simply by desiring to get out. Unfortunately, they're so foolish that they do not want to escape. Therefore, they're compared to the camel who relishes thorny twigs because he likes the taste of twigs mixed with blood. He does not realize that it is his own blood and that his tongue is being cut by the thorns. Similarly, to the materialist, his own blood is as sweet as honey, and although he is always harassed by his own material creations, he does not wish to escape. Such materialists are called karmis. Out of hundreds of thousands of karmis, only a few may feel tired of material engagement and desire to get out of the labyrinth. Such intelligent persons are called jnanis. The Vedanta Sutra is directed to such jnanis. But Srila Vyasadeva, being the incarnation of the Supreme Lord, could foresee the misuse of the Vedanta Sutra by unscrupulous men, and therefore he personally supplemented the Vedanta Sutra with the Bhagavad Purana. It is clearly said that this Bhagavatam is the original commentary on the Brahma Sutras. Srila Vyasadeva also instructed the Bhagavatam to his own son, Srila Shukadeva Goswami, who was already at the liberated stage of transcendence. Srila Shukadeva realized it personally and then explained it. By the mercy of Srila Shukadeva, the Bhagavad Vedanta Sutra is available for all those sincere souls who want to get out of material existence. Srimad Bhagavatam is the one unrivaled commentary on Vedanta Sutra. Sripad Shankaracharya intentionally did not touch it because he knew that the natural commentary would be difficult for him to surpass. He wrote his Shariraka Bhashya, and his so-called followers deprecated the Bhagavatam as some new presentation. One should not be misled by such propaganda directed against the Bhagavatam by the Mayavad school. From this introductory shloka, the beginning student should know that Srimad Bhagavatam is the only transcendental literature meant for those who are Paramahamsas and completely freed from the material disease called malice. The Mayavadis are envious of the personality of Godhead despite Sripad Shankaracharya's admission that Narayana, the personality of Godhead, is above the material creation. The envious Mayavadi cannot have access to the Bhagavatam, but those who are really anxious to get out of this material existence may take shelter of this Bhagavatam because it is uttered by the liberated Srila Shukadev Goswami. It is the transcendental torchlight by which one can see perfectly the transcendental absolute truth realized as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Text 4. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirayet. Before reciting this Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayana, unto Naranarayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Srila Prabhupada's purport. All the Vedic literatures and the Puranas are meant for conquering the darkest region of material existence. The living being is in a state of forgetfulness of his relation with God due to his being overly attracted to material sense gratification from time immemorial. His struggle for existence in the material world is perpetual, and it's not possible for him to get out of it by making plans. If he at all wants to conquer this perpetual struggle for existence, he must reestablish his eternal relation with God. And one who wants to adopt such remedial measures must take shelter of literatures such as the Vedas and Puranas. Foolish people say that the Puranas have no connection with the Vedas. However, the Puranas are supplementary explanations of the Vedas intended for different types of men. All men are not equal. There are men who are conducted by the mode of goodness, others who are under the mode of passion, and others who are under the mode of ignorance. The Puranas are so divided that any class of men can take advantage of them and gradually regain their lost position and get out of the hard struggle for existence. Srila Sutta Goswami shows the way of chanting the Puranas. This may be followed by persons who aspire to be preachers of the Vedic literatures and the Puranas. Srimad Bhagavatam is the spotless Purana, and it is especially meant for them who desire to get out of the material entanglement permanently. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Mukhaṁ karoti vāchalam pangum langhayate girim Yat kripatamahang bande Shri Gurun Dinataranam. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Slayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Swapadantikam. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pradeshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. The texts again. Yasvanubhavam Akila Shruti Saramekam Madhyatma Deepam Matati Tirshatam Tamontam Samsarinam Karunayaha Purana Guhyam Tam Vyasa Sunam Upayami Gurum Muninam. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto him, Shuka, the spiritual master of all sages, the son of Vyasadeva, who out of his great compassion for those gross materialists who struggled across over the darkest regions of material existence, spoke this most confidential supplement to the cream of Vedic knowledge, after having personally assimilated it by experience. Narayanam namaskritya narang chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam mudirayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayana, unto Naranarayan Rishi, the supramost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. So there is an awful lot going on in these verses. Last week, I think it was last week, yeah, I spoke on a verse from the first chapter that was the last of the 6 questions the sages ask Srila Sutta Goswami. So the context again here is that at the beginning of Kali Yuga, a great number of sages and a great variety of sages, understanding the unhealthy influence of the age that is to come, gathered in the forest of Naimisharanya, which is sometimes said to be the center of the universe, to engage in a 1,000-year sacrifice to, I guess, in a sense, blunt the inauspicious influence of this age of discord, this age of hypocrisy and quarrel. And they engaged in so many different activities. It's described that because of the fire sacrifices they were conducting, that the bodies were covered with soot from the ghee and the wood burning in the fires, sacrificial fires. And then Sutta Goswami showed up, and they recognized Sutta Goswami as perhaps the greatest among them. And they offered him the Vyasasana, the seat from which transcendental knowledge is spoken. And they asked him 6 questions. And the last of these 6 questions was, now that Krishna, the personality of Godhead, has left our vision in this material world and returned to his own abode, where do we find dharma? Where do we find religious guidance? Where do we find light in this world, in this dark age of Kali? And as we'll see, well, I mean, go straight there right now. We'll see in the next chapter, in chapter 3, Sutta Goswami answers this question. He says, Krishna Swadhama Pagate Dharma Jnanadi Visaha Kalau Nashta Drshamesha Puranarko Dunodita. This Bhagavat Purana is as brilliant as the sun, and it has arisen just after the departure of Lord Krishna to his own abode, accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc. Persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in the age of Kali shall get light from this Purana. Um, so, uh, you know, this is an important thing to note in these verses, especially Srila Prabhupada emphasizes the nature of the Bhagavatam as the natural commentary on the cream of Vedic knowledge. So Vedic knowledge has several components. One is the four Vedas, the Rig, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva Vedas. And then the Puranas are, as Prabhupada points out, explanatory commentaries on the Vedas, because in the Vedas, as Srila Prabhupada points out, there's something for everyone. And so different kinds of people will need help trying to make sense of it, because there are so many instructions that seem to be contradictory. As I've mentioned before, Srila Prabhupada's godbrother and close friend, B.R. Sridhar Swami, sometimes referred to the Vedas as a jungle of sounds. So I don't know how many of you have had experience getting lost in a very thick forest. And sometimes if the canopy is thick enough, we can't even see the sun so that we can discern, you know, which direction is north, which is west, which is east, which is south, etc. And if we don't know that forest very well, it's very easy to get lost. And in the same way, the Vedas give instructions for people in all statuses of life, people with different kinds of goals. So there are instructions in the path of karma for those for whom for those folks who are actually eligible for trying to pursue material pleasure. And by eligible for trying to pursue material pleasure, I mean that they're not particularly eligible for anything more because their consciousness is so focused on, you know, how do I get through the day? How do I get more? How do I keep up with the neighbors? You know, my neighbor goes out and buys a brand new Range Rover, and I'm driving my 15-year-old Toyota Corolla. Then I think, oh my gosh, I need to get a nicer car, so I don't want to bring down the property values in the neighborhood because I don't have as snazzy a yard or as trendy a paint job on the outside of the house or as nice a car in the driveway. How do I make my husband or wife and my children happy right now, right here, right now? So those people are eligible for the path of karma. Other people are more interested in some kind of transcendental realization, trying to find the Lord in the heart and having a situation that's more compatible with their real identity as pure consciousness, a um, spiritual substance. And they may be eligible for the path of yoga, which teaches how to meditate ultimately and ultimately realize the super soul, that expansion of the Lord that lives in the heart of every entity. Others have completely gone beyond and concomitantly, such yogis may also develop some sort of mystic powers, being able to be lighter than the lightest or heavier than the heaviest, etc. Being able to bring things from a distant place and things like that. And then there are people who merely want to realize their identity as spirit. as being, and kind of in a sense, realizing their identity with the ultimate spirit. And these people are in the Vedic, um, in the Vedic scheme of things, are referred to as jnanis. They're seeking some kind of transcendental knowledge that affords them complete relief from the miseries of material existence. Which comes through relieving themselves of all the misconceptions that bind them in the material world. So there are different kinds of eligibility, and it's a little hard for people to sort that out without proper guidance. So Srila Vyasadeva compiled the Puranas, the 18, especially the 18 great Puranas. But even there's something for everyone. 6 of those 18 Puranas are meant for elevating people from the mode of ignorance to the mode of passion. 6 of them for elevating people from the mode of passion to the mode of goodness, and 6 for helping people become more firmly situated in the mode of goodness with an eye to actually transcending even the mode of material goodness, which still is going to have some tinges of passion and ignorance. And so each of these is accompanied by a sort of aspiration or a mindset. So the mindset of those in the mode of ignorance is that why bother? My life is miserable. Why should I bother to try to get ahead? So they're they're not really motivated to make progress at all. Mode of passion is all about getting ahead and making progress. Mode of goodness, in the mode of goodness, people become conditioned by a sense of happiness, a sense of general well-being. Happiness doesn't just mean like material thrills. Happiness means, in a more philosophical sense, it means a sense, a general sense of well-being. So, we become conditioned by the mode of goodness to, having a nice, um, compatible situation in the material world. We become, we try to see things in a way that we're not so completely agitated by them. And then there's the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam is actually meant um, for bringing us to this stage of transcendence. But actually, I got a little bit ahead of myself. So we have the Vedas, we have the Puranas, and then we have the Vedanta Sutra. And the Vedanta Sutra was composed by Srila Vyasadeva to sort of, because the Vedas are vast, the 18 Puranas make the project even broader. And so he's condensed this knowledge into these sutras or codes, aphorisms. And the aphorisms in the Vedanta Sutra are that language is very, very dense. And that needs to be unpacked also through the guidance of a teacher. And therefore, different great teachers in the past, different acharyas have left different commentaries. One prominent commentary is, as Srila Prabhupada points out in the purport to verse 3, his Adi Shankaracharya's Shariraka Bhashya. But the Shariraka Bhashya actually misleads people from the ultimate goal of the Vedas, which is prema, which is to attain love, especially pure love for Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, that's considered the cream. Srimad Bhagavatam is considered the essence of the cream. So in Indian culture, there are different uh, uses for milk depending on how condensed it is. So um, we churn milk um, to isolate the cream from the milk. We see, if you ever have bought raw milk, unprocessed milk from folks who keep cows. Um, Depending on the kinds of cows and how they're fed, you'll see because the milk hasn't been homogenized, it hasn't been treated in a way that kind of emulsifies the butter fat in the milk, and it'll float up to the top because we know that oil floats on top of water. So depending on what kind of cows someone is maintaining and how they're fed, there'll be various amounts of cream of varying colors sitting on top of the jar of milk when we get it. There's a devotee who lives in Alachua named Adi Karta, and whenever I was in Alachua, I would buy my milk from him. He keeps jerseys. Now his son Madhu Mangala um, takes care of the farm and the cows. Adi Karta is Adi Karta is, I think, he's even a year older than I am, so he must be 79 or 80 years old now. And so he mostly travels and teaches. But I used to get milk from Adi Karta, and his jerseys were fed on grass and I would guess chaff hay, which is a kind of fermented alfalfa. Cows love it, and it makes for really, really rich milk. And so I think the jars, if my memory is correct, the jars would be about one third cream. And the cream was quite yellow. And when I made butter from that cream, the cream came out the butter came out so yellow that the first time I did it, my former wife remarked, "Oh, I thought they added something like a natto or something like that to the butter to make it more yellow." And I said, "Well, they do, but that's probably because of the kind of cows they get their milk from, which um, often is going to be Holsteins because they're good for volume, um, not so much for richness." And the way they feed them. They'll feed them with a lot of grains so that they'll produce a lot of milk. But feeding them on grass makes for better milk. And and so that's the cream. That's the Vedanta Sutra. Then you make the butter. Then you churn the butter, and that's the essence of the cream. Of course, then from butter you make we make ghee, which is an absolutely amazing substance. So Srila Prabhupada points out that the Bhagavatam is actually the natural commentary on this cream. Some for quite a while, 150 years, there was no Gaudiya Vaishnava commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. And a lot of people wouldn't take the Gaudiya Vaishnavas seriously as a sampradaya because we didn't have a commentary on Vedanta Sutra or the Brahma Sutras. And that's because Lord Chaitanya taught that the Srimad Bhagavatam is the natural, as Prabhupada puts it here, supplementary commentary on the Vedanta Sutras. And after some time, because of these challenges, Baladev Vidyabhushana, a Shiksha disciple of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, um, meditated and received in his heart a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra dictated to him by the deity Govinda Dev. Uh, So that's called the Govinda Pasha. And the Vedanta Sutra tells us really what spiritual life is all about, what the Vedas are all about. And it starts with the aphorism, Atato Brahma Jignasa. Atata means now. Now, after having attained a human body, after having studied all the Vedas, and after having attained the association of devotional sages, now it's time to inquire into the essential nature of spirit. And it ends, the sutra at the very end, the last sutra of the Vedanta Sutra is anavriti shabdat. In other words, liberation is facilitated by sound, or um, once we attain the goal, the goal of the study of Vedanta Sutra, which is love for Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there's no going back because of the instructions of Scripture. So the Srimad Bhagavatam is, it's as Srila Prabhupada says here, it's the one unrivaled commentary on Vedanta Sutra. And Srila Jiva Goswami, one of our acharyas, one of the um, uh, foremost students of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and someone who has been often referred to as the greatest philosopher ever to have lived, took the knowledge of the Bhagavatam and put it into these six essays, extended essays he called Sandarbhas, the Shat Sandarbhas, these six Sandarbhas. And the first of those is the Tattva Sandarbha. And the Tattva Sandarbha's purpose is to establish the Srimad Bhagavatam as the ultimate way to understand the teachings of the Vedas, especially of the Vedanta Sutra. And a devotee named Srinath Chakravarti Thakur wrote a commentary on the Bhagavatam called Chaitanya Mata Manjusha. And in that, he has a verse that Srila Prabhupada often quoted a couple of lines from. Aradhyo Bhagavan Brajesha Tanayas Tadhama Vrindavanam Ramya Kachidupasana Brajavadhu Vargena Ya Kalpita Shastram Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanam Amalam Prema Pumarto Mahan Ittam Gaura Mahaprabhor Matam Atastatrador Naparaha. The Supreme Lord is to be worshipped as the King of Braja, and his personal abode, which is as worshipable as he is Vrindavan. The most favorable mode of serving him is that which was practiced by the young maidens of Braja. The scripture, Srimad Bhagavatam, is the spotless source of reliable knowledge, and pure love of God is the supreme goal of life. These are the opinions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and we respect them implicitly. So this is the real goal. Srimad Bhagavatam is really what it's all about. And as someone who's, well, just always been curious, always been a reader, and has a couple of degrees in English, I have to say, I've read a whole lot of stuff. I've read a lot of really amazing literature in this world. Some of which for which I still have a high regard, really very high regard, sometimes because of the insights that it may provoke us to, or just just really, really beautiful writing from different aspects. But I have never, and I've read a bunch of religious stuff as well, a bunch of spiritual literature as well. I haven't seen, there's nothing like Srimad Bhagavatam. It's it's sui generis. It's actually in its own class. And then verse 4, gives us a really clear idea how we should approach the Bhagavatam. We should approach the Bhagavatam with a mood of, with an open heart, uh, with a reverential mood, and with a very grateful heart. So Sutta Goswami sets this example. He says, before we recite Srimad Bhagavatam, which is itself the very means of conquering over the darkness of the age of Kali, the darkness of the material world, we should offer respectful obeisances to the Lord in different forms, and to Mother Saraswati, that energy of the Lord, the goddess of learning, whose shelter helps us open our minds and our hearts so that we can understand properly, and unto the author, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. And you see many devotees, before they speak, after reading the verses and purport on which they'll speak on that day, they will recite this and a couple of other verses from the second chapter. And sometimes, I guess there's some book circulating in ISKCON that has this group of verses as to be recited before speaking on Srimad Bhagavatam. This isn't something that I saw Srila Prabhupada do, and I attended on quite, and listened to very many classes and listened to even more, hundreds, maybe thousands of more classes that he gave on Srimad Bhagavatam. And he didn't recite these verses. However, I do recite verses meant for opening my heart to guidance from my own spiritual master and our previous acharyas, especially so that my anything I say actually is compatible with the way Lord Chaitanya's teachings are presented, especially by Srila Rupa Goswami. So we want to approach this when we speak on it. We want, as an audience, we want to approach it with respect. Therefore, the person who speaks on the Bhagavatam is put on a special seat, a little bit above everyone else, sometimes more above everyone else than I find to my taste, and sometimes more decorated, more fancy than I prefer. But I've kind of gotten used to that. It's very daunting at first, very kind of like weird. But this is how we want to approach it, with respect and with gratitude. I was watching a recent podcast where there was a conversation between Namarasa, my friend Namarasa, and Hari Parshada, who's a devotee who's very scholarly. He seems to have the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, all the Sandarbhas memorized in Sanskrit, and he writes beautiful Sanskrit poetry, so he actually understands them. And he was pointing out in this conversation that there is a method of atonement for stealing. There's a method of atonement for breaking vows. There's a method of atonement for killing brahmanas. There is no method of atonement for ingratitude. So whenever we approach Srimad Bhagavatam, either as someone who's meant to speak about it or someone who wants to hear about it, we need to approach it with this reverence and gratitude for all those who've helped us actually find the light that the Srimad Bhagavatam shines into this Kali Yuga. Oops, we're at the top of the hour. I don't know how I did that. So I'll stop, and I don't know how quickly people need to rush off to the rest of their day. If there's any brief discussion, maybe we can entertain that. But that's up to Vrindavan Matabar, who does have to.
Maharaj, I have something I would like to say. Well, the first thing is I just wanted to say that I, I found it a little amusing and very helpful that you discussed how those who are eligible for material pleasure just means they weren't, it really just means they weren't eligible to be put in any other category, so they just kind of got dumped in the lowest of the low. So that was helpful to
They're
me.
just not ready yet.
Yeah, yeah,
So we don't, if we find such people, we don't want to give them too much. We don't want to overwhelm them. We don't want
yeah.
we don't want to turn them off. We share a little. I was watching the expertise with which Vaisheshika Prabhu answered a number of questions the other day in the question and answer booth at the Rath Yatra.
Yeah.
And as usual, I'm sitting there with admiration kind of like bursting out of my heart. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I was just thinking I'll try and remind myself if I'm ever not getting some material pleasure that maybe I was hoping for, that means that must mean I'm a yogi, that I'm not eligible for this material pleasure.
That's the point that Rupa Goswami makes in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Once we're eligible for bhakti, we're not eligible for yoga, we're not eligible for jnana, and we're not eligible for karma. But that's
Yeah,
expired.
yeah. And then you also mentioned something regarding basically like respectability and yeah, you were talking about how like the Vedanta Sutras, like the Gaudiya Vaishnavas kind of deliberately chose like we're not going to comment on this, separately from the Bhagavatam because Mahaprabhu says the Bhagavatam is enough. So as you kind of look at the life of Srila Prabhupada, you can see where sometimes he does everything he can to resist the appeal to respectability, and he's just a complete pioneer and he just totally goes against the grain. And then you can see times when he actually he finds it very important, discussing with the devotees like how they should dress when they go on Sankirtan, or doing certain ritualistic activities in Vrindavan and Mayapur to please the locals. And I guess I'm just kind of, this is sort of open-ended, but I think we are just very practically we're trying to do something that's going a little bit against the grain here, and sometimes we find ourselves asking,
I just
what? Oh, sorry. We find ourselves, thinking that, well, there's something we could do. Here's one option that's like, kind of like, just, we're just part of the greater, Gaudiya community, and we're all just friends, and and then another option might be, we want to take a bold step to differentiate ourselves, and we want to be doing something different, and maybe that will ruffle feathers, and we can't just like expect Prabhupada to whisper the answer in our ears every time.
Yeah, sometimes sometimes the answers come easily. Sometimes we need to do research, and a lot of times that research is digging into our heart, trying to hear the voice of the Samashti Guru, the Super Soul, and sometimes that of the Yasti Guru, our own particular spiritual master, and figure things out, in a sense, figure things out for ourselves. We don't do it without superior guidance, but this is not a cookie cutter process. Bhakti yoga is not a, there is a bhakti yoga, there is a sadhana for each sadhaka. There's kind of like broad things that everybody can do, but everyone has a unique relationship with Krishna. And at a certain point in our practice, even our practice may become a little differentiated from others' practice. And the way we present it is going to be different. The way Srila Prabhupada presented Bhakti Yoga when he came to the United States was different from how his godbrothers were presenting it in Bengal or Odisha or Maharashtra or Uttar Pradesh. And that's perfectly appropriate. And that's something we can all be grateful for. That, as you say, he was so bold. So sometimes we have to be a little bold. Just when my godbrother and friend Charu, whatever it was, 40 some years ago, left LA, left nice service in LA, and went to some place called Spanish Fork, Utah. Where in the world is Spanish Fork, Utah? And bought an AM radio station. Come on, AM wasn't even cool anymore by that time. Anything that was cool on the radio was on FM. Plus, you got better sound anyway for the music and stuff. And I remember devotees saying, "What in the heck is Charu doing going to middle of nowhere, Utah, for God's sake? Middle of Mormon." Well, we see what he was doing. He was looking for a way to present Krishna consciousness to people who might not otherwise have the opportunity. The same thing with the devotees who in the 70s and 80s were running around in the Soviet bloc countries, sometimes jumping out of windows with the KGB or some kind of secret police right on their heels. I remember hearing stories about Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj and what's his name, Bhakti, I can't remember, another son, used to be Dear Krishna. Um, uh, actually kind of like, whoop, 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 like running away from the secret police who were right on their heels in the 70s and 80s. Prabhupada loved that. So yeah, we just we stay the course. We get guidance from those devotees we trust. Oh, and there's another big point that I missed here that I really wanted to emphasize. Shukadev Goswami realized this by experience. He was already a liberated soul, but when he heard a couple of verses from the Bhagavatam, he realized, oh my God, being an Atmarama, being merged in Brahman, that's not the whole thing. There's more than that. So he went back and heard from Srila Vyasadeva. And he assimilated it by experience. So pratyaksha is not a useless thing. And in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya describes Shraddha, or faith, as being something that's realized by experience. Shraddha Shabde Vishvasako Sudartanishchoy. It's not just a belief, it's conviction. And conviction comes from experience. If we hear something from somebody who we think is cool, we may believe it. But when we experience it, we don't believe it, we know it. We become it. So these two verses are so rich and juicy. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for your insights, Natavar. That's glad we were able to stay for that.
Okay, thank you, Maharaj, and thank you to everyone who joined in person or online. And we'll be back tomorrow with more from